Thanking for joining. I would like to explain the purpose of this webinar series where we were having this webinar every third week Thursday from 7 to 8 p.m. We have a few objectives in this webinar series to provide a forum to exchange information and for looking organization and individual interest in theory and practice of monitoring and evaluation, undertake and promote capacity development in the evaluation field, and promote, advance, and disseminate the theory, practice, and use of evaluation. This webinar series will help to achieve these objectives. Today, our moderator is our Vice President, Professor Hemanthi Ranasinghe. She will be proceeding from this point onwards. She is the Senior Professor in Department of Forestry and Environment Science attached to the University of Sri Lanka. She is a chartered environmentist, and she is involved with academic and examination committee in IEPSL and Sri Lanka Association for the Advancement of Quality and Productivity, and co-chair for IUC and SEM in South Asia, and a lot of roles has been played by her in this field. So I would like to invite Professor Hemanthi Ranasinghe to moderate the session and introduce the speaker and rest of the activities, while thanking again the remaining participants is warmly welcome to become a resource person and presenters in the future. Few members has been raised their willingness to take this opportunity to present their own cases presentation. So we will be contacting them in the next few days for future webinar series as resource persons. Thanks again.
Thank you, Jinendra. Let's start by introducing our resource person for today, Dr. Thilina Wanigasekera. Dr. Wanigasekera is a highly accomplished medical professional and leader, currently serving as a medical director at the Ministry of Health in Sri Lanka. She's also the president of the Organization of Women in Science in the Developing World from 2023 to 2025, and the immediate past president of the Sri Lanka Association for the Advancement of Sciences Medical Section. In addition to her clinical roles, Dr. Wanigasekera is a sought-after visiting lecturer at numerous prestigious institutions, including the Open University of Sri Lanka, Australian College of Business and Technology, and the University of Colombo. She also brings her expertise to various organizations as an HR consultant for the WHO, a monitoring and evaluation expert for NASTIC, and a joint secretary and senior scientist for the Senior Scientist Forum at NASTIC. Dr. Wanigasekera is an active member of several professional organizations, including Sri Lanka Evaluation Association, Women in Management, Women in Logistics and Transport, and is a founder member of Women in Science and Engineering. So today, she'll be sharing her insights on the topic, Loss to Gain, everything you need to know about effective project evaluation. So please join me in welcoming our resource person for today, Dr. Thilina Wanigasekera. So, Doctor, you will have 30 minutes to make your presentation. And while the presentation is on, I would urge the audience to put your questions, because there would be a 20-minute Q&A session immediately after the presentation. So please put your questions in the chat box. And once the presentation is over, if you still feel that you need to ask, you can raise your hand, and so we can give you opportunity. So I would like to request all of you to keep your microphones mute, and if possible, your videos also closed because then it will improve the bandwidth of the session. So over to you, Dr. Thilina, for your presentation.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. So, Madam Hemanthi Ranasinghe, it is a privilege to have a involvement with SLEvA. Thank you, Mr. Jinendra Kothalawala. So, I think now connecting with, can you all see my presentation?
Yes, we can see.
Whether it is moving?
You need to move it. Yes, yes, it is moving. Yes.
Right. Okay. So, good evening, everyone. So, thank you, SLEvA, for giving me the opportunity. I think on behalf of all these joint event, Mr. Jinendra Kothalawala, Nimesha Gunasinghe, and our Punya, everyone is helping us to make on board. So, without making any further notices, I will start my presentation. So, by looking at the topic here, loss to gain. So you know that everything you need to know about the effective project evaluation. So this is what in Sri Lanka we need to have an eye on this, because we are conducting a lot of projects under several ministries, and we all, I think in one point of time, we are working with projects. So sometimes we are having this project success, sometimes we are not having that. So in my presentation, you can see the overview of what are we going to discuss. So we will go to the general information to have some idea about this, and overview of what we are doing today, and what is the rationale for M&E and key M&E concept. Very few brief descriptions, because we don't have much time. Half an hour is not at all enough time to discuss this big topic, and considerations of an M&E system, and how to establish an M&E system for project evaluation in your context, and how to assess this thing. So when we need to discuss all these things, we have to consider our key outcomes. So what we expect from you after listening to all these versions. So what is needed to be knowing with this particular talk or the dialogue. So what we are going to understand today is what are the key concepts of monitoring, not the monitoring, but the evaluation, and also understand monitoring and evaluation in the context of projects. So you know something about monitoring, but sometimes evaluation is one thing that it is not very popular in Sri Lankan context. And we need to introduce a name called results framework, and also identify the indicators depending on each project, right? And understand the relationship between the indicators and the data. Sometimes we need to customize this evaluation plan as it is with the project. So everyone knows what is project and what are the things that we expect when we are going to conduct evaluation process, right? So before all the thing, you need to understand the basic concept of what is monitoring and what is evaluation. So monitoring is something that we conduct it regularly and analyze the information to determine whether we are progressing towards an intended results or not, right? But evaluation is a periodic one, which aims specific questions about the relevance, efficiency, and effectiveness of the particular project, right? So evaluation is measuring some impact, right? And also, so when we are going to do it, so we have to collectively think about the attributes of that, right? So I think you can see that we have monitoring in one arm, evaluation is one arm. So these are the basic things which is difference from the monitoring. Evaluation is something that accountability is one purpose of doing the evaluation. And again, we need to think about the objectives, what we are going to do. If the project objectives we are not very familiar, so we can't evaluate, because we need to set the criteria of evaluation depending on our objectives. And again, when we are designing a project, we have to always think about the project outcome, impact, and attribution. And also we have to have a timeline. So, and again, indicators and standards. So everything we have to set depending on our project objectives. So we have to think about what is this project objective is. Everyone knows about it. Nothing is unfamiliar, but when you're coming to evaluation, it will be having some gross impact and also not like monitoring. So you have to critically think about it. So what are the key components of an M&E system? So you need to have what is the project you're going to evaluate, right? And then again, you have to keep an eye on your results framework. When you are writing a project, you need to have this, what is your result and how you define this project is going to end like this and what is the expected objectives of that. And then again, you have to set the indicators and targets, right? So again, you have to know about this, your data sources, because your entire evaluation is depend on your data, right? So then you have to critically think about which source of data you are going to take and how this data is purified and what are the things that you are using to collect the data and what instrument you are going to use to collect the data. And totally this data collection is one of the most important component in the evaluation system. And again, data management. So if you don't have a clear-cut idea about how you are going to analyze the data, so evaluation is not an easy task. And then what are the methodologies of reporting and dissemination of your data, right? And again, you need to sketch out an evaluation plan. So when are you going to evaluate? Some project you need to evaluate in the midterm, and sometimes closing, after closing, you need to evaluate that whether it is met the expected target or not, right? So what are the rationale of the monitoring and evaluation in the context of qualification framework? So you may have heard of this. So it is a track to progress and keep implementation on track. So what is this? So you need to identify what is working well in the project. So which way you are going to proceed? Are there any setbacks you need to stop, right? When you are not having any kind of a good result. So what are you going to do? And how are you going to adjust the policy of like, let's say, if there is already implemented something or memorandum of understanding or something like that with certain parties, you have to think about it. So which one is to be fulfilled? Which one is to be achieved? And how you are going to access the result, right? And again, you need to generate knowledge and share the lessons you learn. Why is that? Right? So this qualification framework is relatively new and there is a limited documented evidence regarding their effectiveness and impact. So these are newly established things when you are going to learn about evaluation in certain areas, right? So usually you know this thing. So what is input, what is activity, what is output and outcome and impact. So this is very familiar terms, right? So what is monitoring? Up to the outcome level you can monitor. But when you're going to evaluate, you need to evaluate from the output to impact. So it is not from the beginning, right? So sometimes you can do input evaluation, whether it has been correct and set in a very correct manner or not. But usually we are doing evaluation at the latter part of the project, right? So how you are going to assess your output? What is your outcome? Outcome in the sense benefits of the project. So you can see it is very visible and it is sometimes measurable. So impact, again, it will take time, but you can evaluate that, right? So some condition you have to assume that this is what is, some are not tangible. So then you have to assume that, right? So, and again, you need to think about these areas of interest. So what is this quality frameworks? What it will say? And what is the attitude towards the evaluation of the team members or the stakeholder parties, involved parties, and the knowledge regarding national quality framework levels and their application to quality framework, and change to evaluation culture. Certain projects and certain ministries or certain institutes, they don't have a behavior of evaluating. So they just, for the sake of doing the project, they will continue that. So they will put the inputs, maybe the financial inputs. So they will see there is an output. Output in the sense it is like spend all the money allocated. That is not the case. You have to evaluate the outcome and the impact. So this is not having this type of culture is not in the Sri Lankan context, because most of the things are ending up with the monitoring or something, evaluation of the first part, like output evaluation. But project itself, you need, until the impact, you have to evaluate from the impact, output, outcome, and impact. So what are these skills you need to develop? So you have to identify the gap. Why we are doing evaluation? To identify the gaps. So then again, the next step will be correcting the gap. If there is a skill shortage, you have to mention that we have identified through our evaluation. Let's say a project you are going to evaluate in the midterm. So in the midterm, you realize that correct skill mix is not there. So what is the next step? You have to correct the gap, right? So how to develop these conditions? So you have to enhance the mobility and labor market participation and integration. What is that? So you have to, again, you have to rethink about, are we going to continue like this, right? So, because you need to think about this. When you start a project output is something like immediate what you see. Like let's say the financial progress or financial evaluation. Output is whether you have spent that money or not. But outcome may be different. It could be a short-term one, intermediate-term one, right? And also after 1 to 3 years or something like that, right? If it is a long-term one, we usually say it is more than 3 years, right? So impact occur roughly after about certain more longer time. Let's say after 3 to 5 years. So if you are going to evaluate a short-term outcome, so you have to do it in intervals. But if you want to proceed with the impact evaluation, it will take years. So you need to, it is depend on the project also. Some projects are could be evaluated after more than, like, let's say 10-15 years. So still worth, right? So what are the key considerations, right? So sometimes you have to get these approximations. What are those? Sometimes these data may not be like very clear, right? Some data may be missing, right? This is a typical thing happening in Sri Lankan context. Sometimes you can put your observed measures, right? So some are direct outputs, so you can measure that, right? It could be qualitative or the quantitative, so you can get the number. It is like a frequency, you can assess percentage or something like that. If it is a qualitative one, like let's say level of satisfaction, so if you are going to assess that, how are you going to rate it? So in the evaluation, it is something subjective one, right? So you need to develop skills and competencies to measure all this. When let's say evaluator might change within the project even, so these percentages may be different. So that is, if it is a qualitative assumption, so it could be change depending on the person who evaluate that, right? It could be applied at different levels. So you know that if you are going to do a project, you need inputs, activity, output, outcome, and So finally, after 3-5 years of the project, you get impact. So like that, in different levels, you can intervene, right? So you can evaluate the policy level even. So why we are going to do this project? Who told to start this project? So that is a policy decision sometimes. Most of the, let's say, health projects, primary health care, right? Accident and accident prevention or non-communicable disease prevention. So else nutritional, like let's say food security or something like that. So you are going to implement that project at the community level. So when you are going to do the implementation, before that you have to do a lot of groundwork. So then you can set levels where to evaluate, when to evaluate. So what is the timeline to evaluate, right? Like that, when there is a project designing, the designer itself is telling, have to measure that, what am I going to evaluate? So let the evaluator to evaluate what at the end of the day. So like that you can see. So at different level, how this project could be evaluated. So why this project, what is loss to gain? Loss is like you are like just leaving the project as it is and let it to go. But your evaluation, what you have found, not being incorporated in the next step. So if it is such, we call it, we are going to lose the project, or else maybe not that such a profitable or fruitful project. So that is why we have to have evaluation at the midterm and at the end also. Because if you have to extend the project, sometimes the project could be extended some months or some years even, especially these mega projects. So then you have to see why we are going to continue that project, right? So are we gain anything? So the answer you can get from your evaluation report. So if you are going to undertake impact evaluation, it will take long time, right? So most of the people in Sri Lanka, they are not familiar with impact evaluation because they say, it is taking longer time. We are not going to do it. We cannot do it. No such a change. The things are continuing. So even the next person, when they are going to design another project, this impact evaluation may help to create a better project than this, because your lesson learned, it is there, right? If you're going to evaluate outcome, what are you going to do? Again, you need to think about what are the results. Each activity, what are the expected results, right? Maybe change in learning, change in knowledge, attitude, skills, or understanding. Sometimes it is a better or different practices. So you are going to have that by doing this project. You need to change the community or the people or the stakeholders to think in a different manner. So you can measure it. These people have changed that. Let's say you are going to design a project on road safety, right? So if the accidents are less, the people's behavior and understanding about the loss of this haphazard driving, you have changed it. So you have achieved now something. So like that, you have to think, which am I going to achieve through the project? So these are the indicators then to see whether you have achieved that. You can evaluate. So what is the output of that project? Maybe a service improvement, right? Or maybe a different intervention. So you can measure the deliverables. So that is something that you have evaluated after the project, not just output. You are telling these are the output. But if you are not measure it, what is the percentage or whatever quantity that has been changed, it is not having any fruitful way. Now, if you are going to evaluate activity, so you can measure that what has been done throughout this time period. Who is being involved? Is there a positive change in that? Right? And again, you can do this input evaluation. Inputs are like, let's say, human resource or material or the other resources used or the financial. So usually we do evaluate that, whether we have completed the project with spending all the allocated money or not. All the human beings allocated to the project has been presented or not. But not the result, right? What have been used up to now, we could see. So then you have to think, effective project evaluation has to be included all these 3-5 steps. Why? You are going to change something. So then this step will help you to design the next step, right? So you have been given a cream indicators. This is just an synonym. So what is cream? You have to be clear, right? And it has to be relevant. Your measurable things has to be appropriate to the project. And it is economically reasonable cost. So you can't design something like, let's say, this results will be good, but the cost will be higher. I don't think it will a sustainable project then. So then again, project will get failed. So that is why if you want to gain something through the project, all these things, these indicators, you need to see whether it is there or not, and whether it is adequate, right? This information or the funds are sufficient to conduct this project or not, and monitorable. So you need to see whether it is the impact or whatever the results can be validated or not, right? And also it is measurable or not. So otherwise you can't see anything that when you are going to evaluate, if there is no such clear-cut things to be measured, it could be not successful. We cannot say it is good or bad. So when you are going to establish a M&E system, again, not only the project has to be very well defined, but your evaluations also should be clearly defined. So you have to identify what are the need of this project and what is the demand, right? And what is the demand for evaluation. So sometimes it is not very favorable. And you have to identify the users and users. What is that? So you have to think about it. What is the use of this project and who is going to be benefited, right? Even the health project or whatever, the road safety project or road development project, who are the people who get the benefits of this? So if they are not satisfied, the project will be failed, right? So you have to measure those lateral areas as well. Evaluate that. So identify where the M&E system will be located. So that is not that office or something like that. But you have to think, when are we going to start this thing? When are we going to end this thing? And is there any resources to conduct this? Right? Is there your organization is having a capacity to do the evaluation? Sometimes some organization doesn't have that ability, right? And again, you need to develop a result framework with the indicators. So you have to identify the indicators with the project objectives, right? And again, as I said earlier, data source, right? So data source also is much important, because if you don't have data to analyze, you can't do it. And you need to set the targets. All these things you can use for decision making, right? And what are the users? You can see who are the primary and primary users of evaluation, and what are the use of M&E, right? And again, the same time, you can build the capacity of the organization. So when you are going to evaluate a project, you need to measure most of the things, whether it is inbuilt in your organization or not, because you can't hire all the time the evaluators. That is not possible. And again, you need to impress the administrative purview to get them evaluation culture. And again, when after evaluation, when the results comes with the recommendation, are we going to do the intervention on behalf of that? That is the most important thing. So this will help to go for the change, right? So what are the results framework and indicators, building blocks, and on the M&E systems for qualification framework? So we have learned about the qualification framework. So you need to have all these areas together. You have to plan it, you have to data collection, you have to use the data for decision making, and make the data useful to establish how to analyze the present data. So all these things necessary to have a project going on better way. So again, we have going through this thing, you have to evaluate all these activities, result, and impact. So again, mechanisms also you can evaluate. You can change the mechanism with the evaluation report, right? And again, you can design another project with this hypothesis. So you can use that thing in a better manner to have a better project in the next time, right? So these are the things that you need to see with the outcome, output, and activities. So there are some quality frameworks, so you have to refer that. So when you are designing the project, you have to think about these areas of quality framework, and you have to establish this with the stakeholders. So again, you have to have this transparency in setting all these things, right? So this is how you develop the framework of qualification framework to assess these things, right? So when you are having this output and outcomes, you have to make a trust in between the stakeholders. When you are collecting data, this is very important. And again, this transparency, the governance of data, and or as well as the governance of this project, right? So every step you have to understood with the transparency to the all stakeholders, right? And you have to adapt all these legislation, local legislation. If you are going to do a foreign project, you have to consider that as well, right? And right, again, so you can make these reference sheets. So you can have this indicator, definition of the indicator, what is the data source. Before evaluation, you can have these reference sheets. So then you won't be having any gaps or any problems or any setbacks in the evaluation process. So when you are having all data that you need and all the information you need, so you can do a better evaluation. So, and again, when you do the evaluation, you can get the primary data as well as secondary data. What is primary data? Primary data, you collect directly what you need to collect. So you design that, what are the things that you need to collect, and you collect it. Secondary data is already somebody has collected and you are using that for your evaluation, right? So what is the task? So you have to you have to define 2 or 3 indicators, and then it could be outcome indicators. You can use primary or secondary data, and data collection methods you have to define beforehand, right? So that is the really what you wanted to know. And again, before evaluation, you can do a baseline study. And again, this evaluation could be formative or summative. Formative is an interim one. So then again, you can have a midterm evaluation if it is a big project. And summative evaluation is the final evaluation you conduct with your project end, right? So you have to plan it with the results framework. You have to have questions to evaluate that. What are you going to do with the evaluation? Which area you need to evaluate? And data collection, again, it is very important. I am highlighting that in various times. And timeline. With that, you have to have a work plan and evaluation plan as well. TOR is one of the most important things because you cannot go behind or go against or go lateral to that. You have to have it because I told you that transparency is much important. So these are the things that you have to go through. So there are some stages of evaluation. So you can read it. This is the theory. I am not going to do it. But in summary, you have to have rationale and key concept depending on the project you are going to do, and the consideration as well. Identify the users and users. That is most important, because who is going to benefit it and who is going to involve this project. And the building blocks are the result framework and indicators. And you have to have a solid plan of evaluation. So you can't go like, haphazardly doing that. It is not very useful. So I think we have come to an end of our presentation. I will hand over Professor Hemanthi to go for the question session. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Dr. Thilina. I think you managed your time extremely well. So we have time now for question and answers. So there are some questions in the chat box, which, and also I would like to say that while taking the questions in the chat box, if you have questions to ask to the resource person, you may raise your hand. In the bottom, you have an option raising your hand. So once you have raised your hand, we will know, and we will give you the opportunity to raise your question. So in the meantime, let me see. Yes, Gloria from Tanzania. In fact, we are so glad that we have a wide audience around the world from various countries. So Gloria from Tanzania, East Africa, wants to know, how do you evaluate complex projects such as behavioral change projects in a place where their norms and culture do not support what you advocate as a change?
Yeah. Now, thank you, Gloria, for, I think you're all the way from Tanzania, is having a very good question. So how do you evaluate complex project? So one thing is these behavioral change projects, you won't get success at the first phase. So you can do some phase-wise evaluation. So that is why I told you to set your project objectives first. And then you define what are the things that you need to achieve in stepwise. So let's say first year of project, what you are planned to achieve as objectives. So then that objective, around that objective, you can have these key areas of concern. So then you can have that. Which area? Now let's say if it is a behavioral change project, so you are having that, to achieve that, you are having certain inputs, right? In the process, you are having some processes. You may use certain people to teach people. So in that different steps, you can have indicators. What are you going to achieve in that different segment? So through that, you can do evaluation phase-wise. I think I have given an answer to your question.
I think, Gloria, if you okay, I think it's okay, and she's happy with it. And that's another question from Liberia. Masan Miapa from Liberia. I like the presentation. It's straight to the point. However, do we have to monitor the input indicators as M&E officers? I am thinking because the process activity indicators could also help us measure the input. What do you think about it?
Yeah, it's thank you, Miape from Liberia. So the thing is, now let's say the projects during the COVID time. So that most of the time, most of the projects were stuck. We could not achieve the result at that time because of the problem with the input. Maybe financial inputs, maybe the human resource. So if you are having indicators to measure that in different times, that would be great in certain unprecedented time, not the routine time. Because routine time, I think most of the resources are there. So it is kind of a sustainable thing. But sometimes in some projects, some instances, maybe change of government. Sometimes we have to have a evaluation of the continuous inputs as well. So that is depend on what is your project and how far you have gone through that project, right? So whether is there any problem with the process of the project with inputs, a problem in the inputs? So in that case, you can have indicators to measure the inputs, right? You can evaluate that.
Thank you very much. I think Mr. Ranjit Tabru wants to ask a question. He's raised his hand. Over to you, Mr. Ranjit. You can ask your question. Unmute your mic and ask the question.
I want to. It's a very interesting presentation, Dr. Wanigasekera. We appreciate it. But my concerns are most of these MNEs are considered as fault-finding exercises. I think this is not the purpose. And basically, these monitoring exercises are done. The frequency is very important. What is important is usually it's done midterm and end of the year. And also there's no corrective action that goes on. It's better that the frequencies are discussed and monitoring and evaluation is done more as a performance audit where you have regular things and you liaise with the people who are doing and do the corrective actions. A good example, now you are doing a road to a fisheries harbor, but very often when the project is going on, you find the money is being diverted to the minister's or the MP's house first, and then the road goes through which has no bearing. So there's no corrective action, there's no accountability. I think these are the things that we must look at in the monitoring evaluation so that it is a joint effort how to correct and how to minimize corruption, bribery, and all those actions. Your views on that, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Ranjit Tabru. So I'm happy to answer that question because now most of the time I told from the beginning the project deviations. So there are reasons, as you correctly pointed out, there are reasons. That is why I told that sometimes in some unprecedented time, we need to monitor, evaluate the inputs as well. So when the inputs are not in a correct path, then you know that inputs are not there. So that is why this project is not going to success one fine day. So as you correctly said, in certain countries like us, where this political arena is over the technical experts, these type of things could be happen. I'm not saying no, but I'm not saying yes also, but certain times. But most of the time, if the technical specialties and the technical experts are into the project, as you said, the evaluation has been done for a purpose and the lesson learned you are applying to the project, you can minimize that. But even in developed countries, we can't minimize the corruption as zero, right? We cannot eliminate that, but you can minimize that. So if the project directors and project stakeholders are very strict to the direction of the project, so evaluation is very much helping to get that direction to towards the fruitful end. So I think we can achieve that. I hope I have answered your question.
Thank you very much. It's a very common scenario.
We need to combine the two together. That is very important, actually.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for your answers.
Thank you.
There are a few more questions in the chat box, but I would like you to elaborate on this criteria because it's very relevant to what has been discussed. The criteria that you will use to evaluate these projects. If you can just elaborate a little bit on that one, that would be nice.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. I think from the beginning I have told that criteria. So if there is a project, so projects, the word is very familiar to us, but you always have to think about project objectives. So depending on the project objectives, the process and all these things, you know that there is a thing input, process, output, outcome, and the impact. So in that case, if you don't know the project objectives, you cannot have indicators. What you are going to achieve at the end of the day. So depending on the objective, you have to list out that. So that is why before evaluation, you have to go through the project. So what are the inputs of that? So who is, I told you that users and users and users. So users mean who is going to use this project, and users mean what is the beneficial thing that they will get. So depending on those things, with the project objective, you have to set the indicators. So who is going to benefit that? What are the benefits of the project? So depending on that, you can identify that. So the benefits you can measure as input or else output, and then long term or medium term outcome, right? So then that is how you have to say the indicators. So indicators will be defined depending on the project objectives. And also it could be measurable. Otherwise you can't, like I told you, that quantitative and qualitative one. Qualitative is something objective. So you can say, oh, people are happy at the end of the project, or people have changed their life course, the behavioral change, or you achieve that. But it all subjective. You can observe that whether they have achieved it, but at the same time, the correct result won't be able to get. But if it is a quantitative one, you can measure that. You can give the percentage of received as evaluated. So this project, we have measured everything, we have evaluated. This is the percentage of achievement in the inputs. This is the percentage of achievement in the outcome. So you can see that. So this is how you have to think as a holistic project. Some people may be thinking that evaluation is doing at the end of the project. So you don't need to worry about the rest of the things, but it is not the case. Totally, you have to understand the project from the objectives until the outcome and impact. I think I have answered your question, ma'am.
Yes, Dr. Thilina. Yes. So there are more questions in the chat box. How do you decide and engage counterfactual participants?
Yeah. So it is something controversial in Sri Lankan context. So I think it is depend on the, again, project objectives. So you can decide who is have to be get involved. So this is not a set thing. So depending on the project scope or the expected objectives, you can design that.
And
Prof,
also another one, it says Jacqueline Koning asked technology such as Kobo and others is proving temptingly convenient for data collection. But how can we make sure we control adequately for bias, where a small number of potential stakeholders may not have access to internet?
Okay, so the thing is now, as in our country, most of the time this is happening. I think it is that type of things. Always we have to get the corrective measures. So if it is such, you can use other methods combinedly to get these waves, right? So sometimes, like let's say, some people directly send their messages, not through the internet, some other older methods. So you have to consider that. So sometimes we face that type of thing. People directly respond to that. Maybe some kind of other connectivity, not the internet, through the internet. So that bias could be minimized with that. So this all has to be decided depending on your project. Like let's say I told you that where this project is going to happen, that area, if you don't have the internet facilities, you have to think about the other methods of data collection. I told that data collection is more important because of that. Because we think resource mobilization is similar in everywhere, not as such. Because sometimes you don't have even the telephone conversation facility. So then how are you going to collect the data? So that has to be decided before the evaluation started. After that, if you can't, if you are going to think about it, this bias has to be could be minimized. So that is why I told that when you are taking a project to be evaluated, you have to think all sort of things that related to the project. Because if the person, let's say, if you are going to do the project on mentally unsound people, so most of the time you cannot judge whether they have changed their behavior or not. So it has to be proxy measures. Like, let's say, we have to assume that if by observing not only once, even sometimes, to minimize the bias, you have to do certain different type of activities to collect the like purified data. I think I have answered that question.
Yes, Dr. Thilina, the time is also getting on. I would like to ask you, with your wide experience working in the field of medical sciences, we all know that monitoring and evaluation really helps towards the success of designing projects or success of a project, because we can steer it properly. So if you can bring out some example of how M&E had really brought in success or long-term sustainability of a project, that would be wonderful. And also one more thing to add, we know that institutional capacity, institutional systemization, establishing M&E systems are very important, because these can't be just brought from the top and added to the institution scenario. So what would you recommend to institutions who are conducting projects and programs and policies to enhance their many capacities to ensure that their projects, programs are steered the way it is expected? So
Yeah,
these two questions, if you can answer, that's fine.
Yes, thank you, Madam Hemanthi. So this is something like, when you think about our country, I think rest of the countries are also practicing the same thing. So the country has to adopt that in a long way, in a national wise. So that is why policy and the acts are important. So I think certain part of countries, including our country, we don't have such a culture in our context. So we do monitor the projects, but it is ending in a different level. It is not considered the evaluated for a purpose. Sometimes initially, even if we are somehow or other, we manage to give that culture to the institutions, but even if the hierarchy or the administrators are not willing to accept the recommendations of the evaluators, so that is again a problem. So evaluators are discouraged then. So that is why we need to come from the top level. So it has to be a must. Now let's say these organizations who funds for the projects, so they do evaluate it in their context, even very strictly. So the releasing funds for the second step, they won't do whether we are not managing to managing to achieve the objectives at the phases. So they're not releasing. So they said, correct the project. You didn't achieve the expected result. So we are not having such a culture in our context. So we do accept that failure and we release the things, even the human resource. But certain other donor funders, they are not going to do that. So in such a way, we can control the gaps in evaluation. So then they will be too strict to do the evaluation to get some success of the project, especially the financial things. So like that, we can have some barriers of getting over without evaluation, right? So and policy support and the the governance, And all these things are necessary to implement that. This is not one person task. So it has to be a teamwork. And also the experts should contribute to this, right? So most of the time people, even if we are trained people, when you are going to do it, the problems are arising. So you have to have certain advisory committee or something like that to get the thing get going, right? So otherwise it won't be successful in institutions. So most of the time there is no such a supportive measure to continue or sustain the things. So sometimes we have to stop being continuously doing that. So such instances, we need collective support from the other experts as well, not only health, like let's say a health project may be beneficial for other institutions as well. So collective decision making to evaluation or gap identification for the like constrictive thing. So as some of the participants said, most of the people saying that evaluation is like fault finding. It is not, right? It is, we are going to see a better success in the next step. So you have to realize that. I think it is most important.
Much, Dr. Thilina. That was wonderful. So we are really, all good things need to come to an end. So we have come to our end of our wonderful webinar. So I'd like to invite Mrs. Nimesha Gunasinghe, our Joint Secretary, Sri Lanka Evaluation Association, and also Regional MEL Coordinator for South Asia and Africa, an Australian volunteer program, to do the closing remarks. Nimesha, over to you.
Thank you, Madam. On behalf of Sri Lanka Evaluation Association, I extend my sincere gratitude to Dr. Thilina Wanigasekera for sharing your expertise and insight during today's webinar. Your profound understanding of the subject matter and your ability to communicate it with clarity and enthusiasm made the session truly enlightening to all the participants. Also, your inclusion of practical examples and real-world experiences added a layer of depth to the presentation, making it not only informative but also engaging for everyone to talk and discuss. And also, I would like to take this opportunity to express our sincere appreciation to our moderator, Professor Hemanthi Ranasinghe, for skillfully guiding the discussion and ensuring that every participant had the opportunity to contribute and ask questions. It's not easy. We understand that a lot of questions are coming up, and so you managed very well, Madam. So your moderation played a vital role in keeping the webinar flowing smoothly and enhancing the overall learning experience. And also, I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the participants, your active engagement and thoughtful questions. Your participation made the session interactive and fostered a rich exchange of ideas and the perspectives. So as we move forward, let us remain committed to implementing these strategies and best practices discussed during the webinar. Together, we will continue to learn and grow, drawing inspiration from this webinar insight and expertise. And we are looking forward to another opportunity to collaborate with you again in the future. With that, I will like to hand over for wrap up Professor Hemanthi. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Nimesha. You have done a wonderful wrap up. There's really no requirement for any more. But yes, I'd like to take this opportunity again to thank everyone, most importantly, our esteemed resource person, Dr. Thilina Wanigasekera, who really shared her lifelong experience with us, with the audience. And also our participants. Actually, without you, there won't be a webinar. And it's very nice to know that, we had participants around the world so that we could share, experiences around the world. And so it really inspires us, because this webinar series is being organized by the academic committee of the SLEvA. SLEvA is now operating as committee, so that we are undertaking these training programs, which we hope to offer every month. And we have reached out to our membership also to please join hands with us and be resource personnel. And that's how Dr. Thilina also reached out to us. So we would like to give everyone, all of you, our members and non-members, opportunity to be resource personnel, because this is a wonderful opportunity to enhance our knowledge on a very important topic, a very important area, which is really the key to success of any policy program project, which is monitoring and evaluation. So the SLEva's motto is really to inculcate evaluation culture in the society, and we are slowly but surely getting there. So thank you very much on behalf of SLEvA, on behalf of our president, on behalf of our council, our office bearers, Nimesha, myself, Punya, and all our office bearers and the council, and also our membership. Thank you very much, all of you, for participation in this wonderful event. And until we see each other again, have a very good night.
Good night.
Good night,
Good night.
everyone. Stay in touch.